Welcome. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Michigan Center for Early Christian Studies, I welcome you to today's public lecture with Professor Hunter Hampton of Stephen F. Austin University. But before I formally introduce him, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the Michigan Center for Early Christian Studies. The Michigan Center for Early Christian Studies, or as we refer to it as MCECS, is a nonprofit research association in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for the academic study of Christianity. Our organization developed from four principles. First, the academic study of Christianity is a study of the fabric of culture. The study of Christianity bears witness to the cultural developments of the last 2,000 years worldwide. Culture, particularly Western culture, though a somewhat problematic term, cannot be adequately understood without the formal study of Christianity. The second principle of the MCECS is that Christianity did not develop in isolation from other religious traditions. The traditions and practices of Christianity reflect the early relationships with and parting of the ways with Judaism and other traditions, including Greek and Roman religious traditions. Likewise, Islam, that embodies and reflects some traditions of Judaism and Christianity, where the prophets of the Old and New Testament are very similar to the prophets in the Quran. The third and very important principle for our postmodern world is that the MCECS develops programming and supports the academic study of Christianity as a way to appreciate and increase biblical literacy. The fourth principle of MCECS is that Christianity is not limited to the study of sacred texts or church history. As a foundational cultural element, Christianity is reflected in various forms of media, art, architecture, and even textiles. We're dedicated to exploring how these varied manifestations of Christianity preserve and shape Christian beliefs and practices. Tonight's presentation is yet another example of such an exploration. The MCECS is a registered 501c3 nonprofit corporation. We support the above principles by offering programs such as international conferences, publications, and lecture series, of which tonight's event is one of such a series, and through financial support to faculty and undergraduate and graduate students at the University of Michigan. Additional information about our activities is available on our website, mcecs.org. Please consider partnering with us to support the academic study of Christianity. We greatly appreciate any donation you can make to support our mission and purpose, which you can do at our website. Again, that website is mcecs.org. Now for tonight's lecture, the Gridiron Gospel. As you can see, I'm wearing a Michigan hat because Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Michigan football is somewhat of a religion around here. Tonight's lecture, The Gridiron Gospel, will be given by Professor Hunter Hampton, who is Associate Professor of American History at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. An interesting factoid about Stephen F. Austin U is that it was responsible for the mapping and recovery of debris and the remains from the Space Shuttle Columbia that fell on its premises in 2003. Professor Hampton holds a PhD from the University of Missouri and a master's degree from Fuller Theological Seminary. He writes, teaches, and speaks about American religion, sports, and American popular culture. And I understand that he has a forthcoming book entitled The Gridiron Gospel, Faith and College Football in 20th Century America in the University of Illinois Sport and Society series. With that, I give you over to Professor Hampton.
Thank you so much, John, for having me, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight and watching later on YouTube. I will get my PowerPoint up and going here. I will also start with a warning. I know I'm speaking to people based in Ann Arbor. There will be comments about Notre Dame football tonight. There may be deemed positive comments, and so do with that what you will. But You have now been warned. But in all seriousness, I'm excited to talk with you tonight about my forthcoming book, and the intersection of faith and college football. On May 13th, 2017, Donald J. Trump stepped up to the podium to deliver his first commencement address as President of the United States. He had chosen his school carefully. After winning their presidential elections, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama had traveled to South Bend as commencement speakers at the University of Notre Dame. On garnering 81% of the white evangelical vote in 2016, Trump chose Liberty University and sent his Catholic turned evangelical vice president, Mike Pence, to Notre Dame. Founded by the conservative evangelical firebrand preacher Jerry Falwell Sr., Liberty had become one of the largest Christian colleges in the world, with an enrollment of more than 75,000 students. Liberty's football stadium was full of supporters of the graduates and the president. The crowd roared as the school's president, Jerry Falwell Jr., gasconaded Trump's slight of Notre Dame. He granted Trump an honorary doctorate degree for his, quote, commitment to his country and the citizens who have been forgotten by their own government, end quote. Trump praised the graduates, the Falwells, the parents, and the military to mark the day's celebrations. He specifically emphasized Falwell Sr.'s vision for an evangelical university that would shape the minds of young Christians. He declared, "And I want to thank you because, boy, did you come out and vote." He then praised the school's commitment to developing a winning athletic program. "That is why," Trump bellowed, "Reverend Falwell's vision for making Liberty a world-class institution was having a world-class football team, much like the great teams of Notre Dame." The upcoming football season would be Liberty's last in the lower level football championship series before joining the highest level of competition. Regarding the transition, Trump worried that it would be quite a jump in competition and thought that the upcoming scores may not be in Liberty's favor. But Trump was echoing Liberty's long-stated goals of blending faith, football, and politics. A few months before the president's speech, Liberty's new athletic director outlined his vision for Liberty to be the best Christian athletic program in the United States. He declared that under his watch, Liberty would, quote, garner the same type of appeal among the Christian community as Notre Dame achieves among the Catholic community and BYU garners among the Mormons, end quote. When Trump took the stage to praise Liberty's push to be like Notre Dame on the football field, he was tapping into the powerful combination of religion and football. Both contain lessons in sacrifice, community, and morality. They also accept violence, competition, and rebuke as a means to a positive end. This uniquely American cocktail of American masculinity, aggressive sport, and Christianity, though, has long historical roots. Tonight, we are going to investigate 3 case studies in the histories of the University of Notre Dame, Brigham Young University, and Liberty University football programs to understand how the violent game of football taught the next generation of Christians class, gendered, political, and religious lessons with the Gridiron Gospel. We'll start with the University of Notre Dame. In the fall of 1887, Notre Dame played its first football game against the University of Michigan. Michigan had been playing for 8 years at this point, and the stop in South Bend was little more than practice on the way to a real game in Chicago. At first, the team scrimmaged a little bit and then divided into teams and played. Michigan won the game 8-0. After the game, Notre Dame's president came out to dinner and dined with both teams and praised the sportsmanship of the Michigan team, but also encouraged his students to embrace the game as a part of their college experience. In the late 1800s, there was vigorous debate about the virtues of college football. Was it forming or corrupting young men? For supporters, the violence, the vigor, the ruggedness of the game was essential for turning boys into men. For critics, they saw the game as destructive, prolonging adolescence, and distracting students from their studies, which was why they should be in college in the first place. But what both sides did agree on was that the modern world was changing fast and something needed to be done about it. A real changer of attitudes for the approach to religion and football came from Tom Hughes's classic book, Tom Brown, School Days, which promoted the ideals of muscular Christianity. It's a term often used that I define as the mixture of four distinct components. One being an overt masculinity, two, embrace of sports for a spiritual end, three, encouraging homosocial community, so giving men a space to build male friendships. And finally, heroic savagery, a term of where a person can take on a temporary savage state, like playing football, for heroic ends, often with a religious implication of that. The go-to example, biblical example for many of these is the Old Testament character of Samson, providing guidance and instruction there. So, in this muscular Christian message, you have a blending of faith and sport, but what the sport also provided the men at Notre Dame was the opportunity to play a distinctly American game. In the late 1800s, the sport was dominated by New England elites at schools like Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, the most American of men in many ways. And by Notre Dame students playing the game, they got access to kind of emulate that form of manhood. And Notre Dame took every opportunity to play into that and to contrast themselves to those schools. In 1892, the student newspaper took note of how the students and athletes behaved after a Harvard-Yale football game. The Catholic paper pointed out that the Yale students, quote, hurled torpedoes at the ballet girls and let loose a flock of pigeons. They also reported how the Harvard men, after losing the game, got so upset that they stole the sign from the Bible Society outside of the stadium. For this Catholic newspaper, student paper, they contrasted how their students behaved at a game and urged them to, quote, pray for the far more dangerous heathen educated in Protestant schools. In this moment, football provided, again, these Notre Dame students, these Catholic students, access to something distinctly American. And that was something that was up for debate within the American religious landscape. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII brought into this transition of American identity and Catholic identity with his Rerum Novarum, which gave a defense of labor rights, it blessed labor unions, but also opposed socialism. And this was a papal decree kind of targeting American Catholics, and by doing so, gave American Catholics a real sense of loyalty and unity to their Pope, something that had been being tested for the years before. And in this question of loyalty for American Catholics, were you loyal to a Pope thousands of miles away, or were you loyal to your country? Was something that American Catholics were dealing with at Notre Dame as well. One of the tools, obviously, to help this transition becomes football, and we see it appear in literature like this brief novel written by Father Francis J. Finn entitled That Football Game. Finn is an interesting character and author. He's kind of like a Catholic Horatio Alger, that he would write these young adult novels with characters that had thinly veiled names that were the attributes that the young male readers were supposed to aspire for. And in this game, the main character is a quarterback named Claude Lightfoot. And Claude is wrestling with how can he play this violent game of football, but also grow in his Catholic faith. And he falls under the tutelage of a philosophy professor, teacher, Mr. Kennan. And in this, he's kind of debating this back and forth with his teacher. And finally, Claude Lightfoot has this epiphany moment. And he says, just think, every bump I get can be offered up for my sin. He then goes on to vow that football training, to combine football training and his devotion to the Sacred Heart. The wise philosophy teacher then kind of pats his young student on the shoulder and helps him conclude, the better you practice devotion to the Sacred Heart, the better you will play football. This book, as it reached Notre Dame's campus, got glowing reviews in the student newspaper, The Scholastic, and made sure that encouraged every student to have a copy of it on their shelf. Is a real pivot point for, again, the support and embracing of this game of football within the student community at Notre Dame. For the longer history of Notre Dame football, the 1909 team and season was another turning point. It was this year that the little brother finally beat the big brother. Your Michigan fans probably wish to not remember, but it was the first time that Notre Dame actually beat Michigan in a football game. It's then after this that Michigan cancels the game. It doesn't renew the rivalry for another 33 years. But it's after this year that Notre Dame starts to become more of a regional power and engage in big time college football. It's then also the next year that Knute Rockne enrolls in Notre Dame as a student. And Knute Rockne becomes a real role model for American Catholic men, specifically coming through Notre Dame and the power of Notre Dame football. Rockne was an immigrant. He was born in Voss, Norway in 1888 and moved to Chicago with his family, actually for the World's Columbian Exposition, where his dad presented an early version of an automobile. After growing up in Chicago, he worked as a mailman after high school before he enrolled at Notre Dame. And during his time there, he joined the scrub team as a freshman. And by the time he graduated, he was named an All-American. After graduation, he stayed at Notre Dame as an instructor, but also an assistant coach, and really endeared himself to the administration. The president of Notre Dame described Rockne as, quote, a clean, manly man, Christian gentleman. Rockne then becomes the head coach of Notre Dame. And it's then in his time, after 15 years as a student, assistant coach, and then head coach of Notre Dame, that he actually converts to Catholicism himself in 1925. And for his conversion, Rockne gives this explanation of what happened, that he actually converted by seeing his players attend Mass. He said, for the first time, I understood what a powerful ally their religion was to those boys in their work on the football field. Then I really began to see the light, to know what was missing in my life. And later on, I had a great pleasure of joining my boys at the communion rail. So through this, Rockne's players and their faith and performance on the football field inspired his conversion. Of this conversion, Rockne elevates his celebrity even higher within the Catholic community. The Catholic Telegraph published his conversion story throughout the country, and was picked up in the press elsewhere, and him embodying this kind of new type of American Catholic man that is shaped and formed and thriving in this new modern world through football. And at that point, Notre Dame had realized this powerful combination, that the game helped students prove their loyalty both to their church and their faith and to the country. That by playing this distinctly American game, American Catholics could assimilate into American culture. Now I'll shift over to Brigham Young University because in 1919, BYU was behind the times, not academically or socially, but athletically. They had no football team. 2 decades earlier, the LDS Church had banned the game, and the decision to abandon it now made them outsiders. With the school trying to figure out how to restart a football program, they realized that they needed a coach for their coach. So they reached out to the person with the highest winning percentage in college football history, Newt Rockne. The school's administration contacted Rockne about having a coaching clinic in Provo, but the courting process got off to an awkward start. On January 16th, 1923, the administration sent a letter to Rockne, but mistook the ND of Notre Dame for North Dakota University and addressed the letter to Grand Forks County, North Dakota. Whereas BYU did not know the whereabouts of the famous coach, apparently the post office knew which coach Rockne they were talking about and got the letter to South Bend. Despite the misstep, Rockne wrote back a week later expressing his interest in having the coaching clinic. And the camp was a hit. High school and college coaches from across Utah came to Provo. To pay him, BYU actually hired Rockne as a summer adjunct. But the pressures of adjuncting soon overwhelmed him. He wrote a letter assuring the administration that he would, in fact, someday get to his grading. But eventually he threw in the towel. He admitted, quote, "If you're in a hurry for grades, do that yourself using your own judgment, but I don't believe we should flunk anybody." So as the premier Mormon university entered the uncharted waters of major college football, BYU hoped to follow Rockne's success at Notre Dame. And it's in this same period that Mormonism itself and the LDS Church changed drastically from 1890 through the 1930s. The church abandoned polygamy, and Utah joined the Union as the 45th state. These changes enabled the LDS Church to begin transitioning religiously, culturally, and politically from outlier to mainstream. And one of the tools that eased this transition process for the LDS Church into mainstream America was BYU football. BYU was founded in 1875 as Brigham Young Academy by Carl Meiser, who's German-born and educated, and his influence loomed large over the school that he helped start, specifically his anti-sports philosophy and a real emphasis on education only. But despite his best efforts, eventually students began playing the incredibly popular game in 1893 and forming teams on campus. But these early games were marked, like many early games, and I guess still games today, with incredible violence. One BYU football player from its early teams wrote this about what it was like to be an athlete and playing football at the time. "In those days, there was no such thing as a forward pass. The ball was not dead until it had come to a full or complete stop. Often the carrier kept squirming, snake-like, under a pile of blocking players until his head was pushed, none too gently, into the earth of the playing field. Yes, it was a tough game and hardly a place for weaklings." It's in this moment where the debates around the virtues of football reached to some of the highest levels of the LDS Church, the violence of the game not fitting with the message. And Meiser, who had stepped down from his position at BYU, had joined the General Church Board of Education, which took up the issue of football. And it's there in 1900 that Miser and Joseph Fielding Smith, Joseph Smith's nephew and future leader of the LDS Church, came out explicitly against football and said football should be excluded and forbidden from the sports of the pupils. And it's with that in 1900 that football disappears from BYU's campus. But this leads to a lot of questions of how to behave. What does it mean to be a Mormon man, specifically with polygamy abolished and statehood achieved? How do we assimilate but also maintain our distinct religious identifiers? And of these early football squads, they had to again struggle with this. But the new external marker becomes the word of wisdom. This is a text from Joseph Smith's Revelation in 1833 that is a health and dietary code. Early on, it was seen as more of kind of a suggestion and not necessarily a law. But with the removal of polygamy in 1890, the word of wisdom steps in, and it's these 21 verses that forbid wine, tobacco, hot drinks, and the overconsumption of meat become these primary external markers of what it means to be an LDS man. And by doing so, football comes into this time of question of these external markers, and BYU students themselves were aware of what the lack of football meant for them. In the student newspaper at BYU, there's another fictional story that is written that heightens these tensions of what it meant to be a BYU student and not be able to play football. The story in the paper talks about a love triangle between Alice, who is a BYU student, Harry, who is also a BYU student, and Jack, who goes to the University of Utah, where they maintain their football team. In the story, Harry and Jack fight for Alice's attention. And at the climax of the story, Alice invites Harry to watch Jack play the Thanksgiving Day football game. Her invitation perplexes Harry. Is she asking him on a date, or does she just want company to watch her real love interest, Jack, play football? The stadium is rife with tension. With the football game and the game of love hanging in the balance, quote, the bleachers fairly shook with cheers and the air rang with enthusiasm. Not able to manage her emotions, Alice absent-mindedly thrust her cold hand into Harry's pocket. The hand already in the pocket closed warmly over the little fingers. Alice's overt sign of affection causes Harry, quote, to thrill through and through, and with the thought, she cares, she would rather have come with me. Well, Jack, old man, there's more to games in this world than football. At that very instant, a mass of tumbling, crawling, tussling human beings formed on the field. And out of nowhere, Jack shot across the goal line. Utah won the game, and Harry sees Alice plunging down the slipping steps in the hero's direction. Jack won the girl, and Harry puts his hand back into his empty pocket, emasculated. It's in this story and other stories on campus that BYU students begin to feel this lack of manliness, this lack of identity by not having a football team. But it wasn't the stories that actually tipped the tide back in favor of football, but World War I, the creation of Army training camps across the United States. BYU agrees to have one of these camps put on their campus. And it's the soldiers that are training that begin to organize into a football team. And it looked like in 1918, they were going to be able to form a team when the influenza pandemic swept through campus and shut the campus down. But a shift in leadership with the passing of Miser and Joseph F. Smith brought in new church leaders who had actually grown up playing football at the University of Utah and had a positive relationship and view of the game that began to reintroduce it to LDS schools and campuses. As they went out and reinstated the game in August of 1919, BYU first sent its coach to Binghamton schools and did send him to the University of Michigan. And upon returning, had some really biting critiques of BYU men compared to these men that he saw in the Big Ten, actually referring to BYU students as boys. But on campus, there was, again, this provocation of manhood to try to get players to enlist in the team. This is a cartoon from the student paper entitled Old Friends, also Return of the Prodigal. You can see the spell check was off that day for prodigal. But nonetheless, BYU in this is depicted again as a matronly woman with long dress, heels, hair, and a bun, while football is coming in masculine, muscular, again, dressed in pads, and they're coming into embrace. In the article below this cartoon, calls for students, BYU students, to begin to enroll for the football team and asks them and tells them that they need to get in shape. In the early struggles at BYU, though, continued. Rockne's camp did not bring about the level of success that they had hoped, but the relationship with BYU and Rockne continued. Rockne was a meticulous note taker and statistician, and so BYU reached out to Rockne asking for his game plan against Drake University, because the year before Notre Dame had beaten Drake and Drake had beaten Utah. And based on that logic, BYU believed that if they could act like Rockne, who beat Drake, they could then go and beat the University of Utah. Unfortunately, that is not how football necessarily works. So Rockne, again, kind of helped them begin this process, but also instilled a lot of these muscular Christian virtues into BYU. And after football's return, we do see this real emphasis of muscular Christianity within the LDS Church, specifically at BYU, in that actually the depictions of Jesus actually change, like other progressive era depictions of a muscular young Jesus that happens at BYU in their student papers. But they go a step farther, and actually, for them, Jesus played football. They referred to Jesus, quote, the captain of their football squad, with Jesus leading. No one resents obeying the rules or following the direction of the captain of their team. Christ is our captain, and if we listen to his direction, we are bound to win. So in this moment, we see that football at BYU, again, provided them an aid in this time of transition. It allowed for expressions of masculinity and adherence to the word of wisdom, but also to build connections with outsiders. And BYU football grew to be ever more a location of identity for LDS Americans across the country. And so now, just as saints gather in their ward or branch on Sundays for worship, they gather around their television screens on Saturdays to give BYU's cheer, which goes, "On you go to vanquish the foe for alma mater's sons and daughters. As we join in song in praise of you, your faith is strong, and cheer our Cougars of BYU." What could be more American than that? So it's in this world that liberty steps and starts, in some ways nearly a century behind the University of Notre Dame, and over 50 years beyond, where liberty begins its football program. And liberty is the creation of Jerry Falwell Sr., who was born in 1933 in Lynchburg, Virginia. And he's very much a product of his parents. His mother was an incredibly devout Baptist, but his father was, by his own descriptions, an agnostic hustler and entrepreneur. He's actually a bootlegger during Prohibition. But in high school, Falwell excelled in the classroom. He graduated valedictorian, but also on the gridiron as the captain of the football team. And for Falwell, his conversion experience actually happened after hearing one of Charles Fuller's sermons on his radio show, the Old Fashioned Revival Hour. And from that, Falwell uh, understood the power and the impact of media and used it to his advantage. After high school, he attended a Baptist Bible College in Missouri before returning home in 1956 to found Thomas Road Baptist Church. At Thomas Road, Falwell again used his understanding and really mastery, I would say, of media, at first using the radio and then being an early adopter of television to build his congregation, which grew to over 2,000 people by the late 1960s. But Falwell's kind of involvement in politics got off to kind of fits and starts early on, a cautious embrace. Early on, he actually criticized Martin Luther King Jr. For engaging in political debates as a pastor, saying that was not what pastors should do. But over time, Falwell obviously becomes more and more involved in politics, to the point where in 1968, Falwell actually allows the segregationist presidential candidate George Wallace to give a sermon from the pulpit at Thomas Road. But Falwell's, I argue and I truly believe, most significant creation for him, but also for his legacy, was the founding of initially Lynchburg Baptist College, what would become Liberty, in 1971. And to start the school, Falwell used his televised sermons to raise money, something that created an adversarial relationship with the Securities and Exchange Commission for quite some time. But when he started his school, when he started Liberty, the school's mission statement was, quote, "Here we train champions for Christ." And an emphasis on athletics, specifically football, was seen as a tool for spiritual and patriotic formation. And it is here where we see in 1973 that Liberty starts its first football program, first football season. You can see this is the schedule that was handed out. But in it, I think this shows the blurry line, if line existed at all, between Falwell, Liberty, and his church. And at the back of the program read, for the football team, a sports outreach ministry of Thomas Road Baptist Church. For Falwell, again, these were all seen as kind of a building synergy for him. And in the first football season, the school got out there and did it, but soon Falwell realized the power that he had in this team to build a national audience. So in 1975, he changes the name of the school to Liberty Baptist College to create a national appeal for his school. For the 1975 football season, the school put out this as their football program. You can see the 3 American flags with the word Flames in Star-Spangled Banner font. Obviously, a bald eagle and one talon holding arrows, and its other an olive branch and a football in its beak. Inside this program, I think it speaks to Liberty's kind of core mission for shaping the minds of young conservative Christians. But it also gives a biography of Falwell. It talks about him as a conqueror whose conquest has been athletics, politics, academics, and religion. It goes on to talk about how students gladly accept their spiritual direction from Falwell, and compares, this is the boldest statement maybe of the whole program, but it compares Falwell to the Apostle Paul, and even notes that by the end of it, Falwell may surpass Paul because, quote, he hasn't finished his course. Interspersed throughout this program is a mixing of Liberty's emphasis on patriotism, America's founding faith, and football. You can see the image to the left, a coach praying over his sweaty football players, and below it was this kind of rendition of Washington's crossing of the Delaware, with below it reading, "God revive America." At the end of the 1976 season, Falwell actually changed the school's colors to red, white, and blue. And when asked about all of these changes, the emphasis on football, Falwell believed, quote, "God expects us to be winners. When we represent him, he wants us to be champions," and explicitly states how he wanted to model Liberty after Notre Dame and BYU and achieve the highest level of competition. A big push and advancement for that came in 1988 when Liberty did jump to Division I AA competition, and its coach Borgenhout went 8-3 in that first season, in again an elevated level of competition. And a few weeks after the season, the coach was in Florida recruiting and got 2 phone calls that could not have been more opposite. The first phone call was actually from the Newspaper Association in Virginia, telling him that he had won the honor of Virginia Coach of the Year. The second actually came from Liberty's athletic director, that informed him he no longer had a job as the Liberty football coach. He was fired. After the coach was fired, the coach said, "I'm not bitter with Dr. Falwell, but he'll never be out preaching somewhere and receive a call saying that they're going to bring in Billy Graham to replace him." Falwell never admitted any wrongdoing, instead pointed to Hout's losing record over his time as the head coach. But what Falwell showed in this firing and the person that he would hire was a desire for prestige and attention through his football program. And the man he brought in to lead his team was Sam Ritigliano. Ritigliano had been the coach for the Cleveland Browns up until 1984, but had spent the last 3 seasons as a television broadcaster for NBC and ESPN. On top of hiring the former NFL coach, Falwell increased the new coach's budget for recruiting from $17,000 to $100,000. And the plan for Falwell worked. For the upcoming season, Sporting News sent a journalist to cover the Liberty team. And when the journalist asked Falwell, about the new coach, the new money, all of this, Falwell said, quote, "We feel that evangelical young people deserve a world-class university that equates with what Brigham Young University has provided for the Mormons youth and what Notre Dame has provided for the Roman Catholic youth. We must be about the business of creating a Cadillac program for our young people." It's then a few years later, in 1995, where Falwell is able to again use his football program to his ends. In 1995, the NCAA passed a rule that banned any sort of celebration in the end zone, including kneeling or pointing to heaven after a score. This hint of bureaucratic overreach, infringing on religious expressions, set Falwell into motion. He had done this dance for decades at this point. Immediately, Liberty, Ritigliano, and 4 players filed a lawsuit against the NCAA, declaring the new rule a violation of their First Amendment rights. That Friday, the national media descended on Liberty's football field and interviewed the coach, the players, and Falwell. They announced their intention to continue to kneel no matter the penalty. On Saturday, they played West Virginia Institute of Technology and beat them. This is not a typo, 76-6. And after every score, a player kneeled. Soon after, the NCAA amended its rule and allowed post-touchdown prayers. On Sunday, Ritigliano appeared on Falwell's television show, The Old Time Gospel Hour. Falwell reassured his viewers that he was not in favor of poor sportsmanship, but insisted that any player who kneel owe a debt of gratitude to his Liberty team for defending their religious freedom. After Falwell gives his long, impassioned introduction, he gave Ritigliano 2 minutes to speak. And in his brief homily, the football coach attacked the high status of professional athletes and said that the real heroes were Jerry Falwell, Liberty University, and the 4 football players who sued the NCAA in that specific order. It's in after this that Liberty again strives for Falwell's dream of reaching this highest level of competition, and did so with mixed success in the early 2000s. In 2005, they had a disastrous season where they lost 3 games in a row by a total score of 157-0. And Falwell's reaction to this was to completely restructure the entire athletic department and hire a coach that emphasized winning and downplayed religious commitments. And the coach came in and did indeed win. But the 2006 football season was Jerry Falwell's last. He passed in May of 2007 from a heart attack. And while Jerry Falwell Sr. seemed to hold sincere pastoral commitment and the ruthless business savvy intention, his sons received separate inheritances. His son Jonathan received Thomas Road Baptist Church, and his other son, Jerry Falwell Jr., received Liberty. And it's under Falwell Jr. That Liberty expanded specifically through online education. He started online school in 2007, and by 2008 had over 25,000 students enrolled. By 2010, over 50,000 students, and by 2015, over 80,000 students were enrolled in Liberty's online education. At the same time, Falwell's and Liberty's political influence also grew. It was at a chapel service in 2007 when presidential candidate Mike Huckabee credited Jesus for improving his poll numbers. And as Republican presidential candidates lost consecutive presidential campaigns to Barack Obama, Falwell Jr. gained experience and exposure. And it's during this time that Falwell Jr. really doubles down on evangelical language to appeal to them for their voting. And whether the shift came from or because of the political beliefs professed at Liberty since its founding, Christian nationalism really began to take center stage. Falwell Jr. found his most direct line to presidential power in a similar soul in Donald J. Trump. He first invited the real estate mogul to campus in 2012, raising the curiosity of some for his lack of religious qualifications. But Trump returned in 2016, a few weeks before the Iowa caucus, to give the spring semester's convocation speech. In his talk, Trump thanked Liberty's president for comparing him to Falwell Sr. And hit his standard campaign talking points about his popularity, the need for the Second Amendment, and supporting the military. He also promised to his Christian audience to reinstate the phrase "Merry Christmas." As he thanked the crowd, Falwell Jr. came and gave presidential candidate Trump a Liberty football jersey with his name embroidered on the back. And it's then 8 days later, that Falwell Jr. was one of the first evangelicals to endorse Trump's presidency at a time when only 30% of evangelicals shared these sentiments. And it's through this time, this combination of football and Christianity, that empowered the Falwells to really reshape American faith and politics to their ends. And they most successfully, I think, politicized the game through athletes' celebration. And in 2013, Liberty brought in Tim Tebow to speak to the 10,000 students, faculty, and fans at a commencement. The previous year, Tebow had become a cultural icon for kneeling and putting the clenched fist to his forehead in prayer. This phenomenon of Tebowing, we may remember, took over social media feeds, sports broadcasts, and even wedding photos, recreating his celebration. In introducing Tebow, Falwell Jr. praised his competitiveness, his leadership, and his values. For Falwell Jr., Tebow knelt for exactly what his father had sued for. 5 years later, football player kneeling entered the national consciousness again, but not in the way that Falwell Jr. approved. Colin Kaepernick famously knelt during the national anthem to protest police brutality, and Falwell Jr. jumped at the opportunity to attack his political foes. He threatened to break Liberty's contract with Nike after the sportswear company filmed a commercial with Kaepernick. And in an interview with USA Today, Falwell Jr. stated Liberty's beliefs that, quote, "We strongly support law enforcement and strongly support our military and veterans who died to protect our freedoms. And if the company really believes what Colin Kaepernick believes, it's going to be hard for us to keep doing business with them," end quote. The contradictions of fighting for one type of kneeling and fighting against the other was lost on Falwell Jr., who also admitted that he had not seen the Nike advertisement. But I guess details are unimportant when engaging in political fights with football. Falwell's Jr. Political influence grew, and so did his school's profile in football. In February of 2017, Liberty received news that it was approved to enter the highest level of football competition. And after 46 years, the Falwells' prophetic dream of a football team playing at the highest level of competition became a reality. After that first season, Liberty went 6-6, but the coach abruptly retired at the end of the season. 4 days later, Falwell announced the hiring of Hugh Freeze as Liberty's new coach. The former University of Mississippi coach had been fired for repeatedly calling sex workers from his university phone. It appears, though, that Falwell Jr. had executed one of his father's previous ploys by shifting the old coach into an administrative position to hire a coach who promised media attention and football wins. On campus, students accepted the coach's past sins, motivated by a sinner saved by grace ethos. But once on campus, Freeze did what he does best. He won football games. His first season, he went 8-5, but lost to BYU in Provo by a touchdown. In 2020, he led the Flames to the school's best season with a 10-1 record, finishing ranked 17th in the country and winning the school's first ever bowl game, defeating Coastal Carolina in overtime in the Cure Bowl. Yet, as Liberty's successes reached new heights, Falwell Jr.'s rise ended in shambles. Liberty suffered a series of public embarrassments when investigative reports revealed a double life that broke every commitment he imposed on Liberty students. Falwell Jr. and his wife had engaged in a 6-year extramarital affair with a pool attendant turned business partner, posted suggestive photos with other women, and regularly consumed alcohol at nightclubs. As the Falwells University reached the football mountaintop, it cost them everything. But in 2022, Liberty defeated BYU 41-14. At the end of the game, Liberty's interim president came on the stage and said, "We are just catching up to the God-sized vision my friend Jerry Falwell Sr. had so long ago." It is at Liberty that we see this intertwining of football and Christian nationalism, that football became a vehicle for faith and patriotism and political activism. But success came at a cost. Liberty and other schools had to ask itself, what did God teach them on the gridiron? Did God speak through wins and losses? How could the game be used to evangelize non-believers? What could be gained by building a successful football program, and what would it cost? The way the school answered these questions reveals the way college football shaped their religion. In conclusion, the stories of faith in football, I believe, help tell the tale of 20th century American Christianity. The earliest religious proponents of the violent game hailed its ability to recruit men to churches and reclaim a masculine brand of religion. Groups outside the white Protestant power structure believed that football aided their transition into the cultural mainstream. As scholars present and future wrestle to understand American Christians' relationship to American culture and politics, I believe the study of sport must be included. The combination of sports and faith offers a unique insight into the lived religious beliefs and practices of congregants. In times of crisis, both real and imagined, sport serves as an initial proving ground for aligning faith and cultural values. Each community's college football team continue to provide valuable perspective into their faith and put their faith in action. Whether the supporters of Notre Dame, BYU, or Liberty preach, prayed, or played for their team, they all followed the Gridiron Gospel. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hampton. That was great. And I know I certainly learned so very many things. If you are participating here as a webinar participant, you should be able to send in Q&A using the chat function. So feel free to pop any questions you may have there. While you are thinking of questions, I think I will get us kicked off with a question. So you mentioned sort of there at the end, Tim Tebow. And so I'm curious about how much of the work you've done with thinking about college football also translates into the way that the NFL works. Do we see sort of similar types of issue, or like not issues, but similar types of engagements with religion, or is Tebow sort of an outlier?
No, I think the emphasis on religion in sports is, if anything, actually growing, and it's something that has just become so commonplace in American sports culture and American culture that we don't even recognize it or acknowledge it anymore. You can't watch a post game interview without someone giving credit to God or Jesus for their performance. And it's just, again, it just seeps through all sports. I focus on these specific kind of religious communities, colleges, and their programs to kind of see how each of them is dealing with the different historical issues and religious issues there. But I think more widespread, it is, I think, if anything, growing. But I think we need to spend more time wrestling with that. If both teams are praying to the same God and reading the same book, does that mean that you prayed the wrong way and that's why you lost? Does it mean that God really is a Notre Dame fan? I know I probably shouldn't say that on this thread, but but the implications of that credit for winning and for losing, I think, has deeper religious connotations and meanings when they're really considered and fleshed out. But I think the interesting thing is that it now is just so widespread, and it's that the reporters don't never ask a follow-up. What do you mean by giving credit to Jesus? We just get on to the next question about what they did to win that game.
Yeah, great. It looks like we've got a question here in the chat from Mohammed Nasser. Sorry if I've mispronounced that, Mohammed. That points out that noticed that most, if not all, the football players in both Notre Dame and BYU were white. Was football only accessible to the elite, or is there a race thing happening here?
Yes, so there definitely is a racial component, and I get into this a lot more in the book. I couldn't get into all of the book, but in my book, I actually have a chapter on Wiley College, which is an HBCU actually here in East Texas, in Marshall, Texas, near where I live and teach and work now. And so I'll focus specifically on BYU and the tensions of race and religion there, and that for the longest time within the LDS Church, there was a overt, racism and segregation within the church, and not allowing Black members access to different types of the priesthood. And this actually comes to a head in the 1960s and 1970s when you have Black athletes at other programs actually begin to protest playing against BYU. The different Black athletes at other schools refused to take the field or the court against them because of the racism that they see in the LDS Church, and it's through the, I mean, according to the historian's perspective, through those challenges that really begin on through sports that the LDS Church begins to change and challenge those, and eventually reverse that, and so that now um, people of color have equal access to different layers of priesthood within the LDS Church. So yes, there is an explicit racial component that didn't get into here. It also gets into it at Liberty as well, but for time's sake, I just wasn't able to kind of pull on every single thread that I want to. But in the book, when I have more words, I am able to do that. That's also a shameless plug to buy the book.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did drop a link for the book in the chat, so if you need me to send that again, I can, but definitely check it out. Jim, I think you had a question. I'll just let you ask it because you're here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hunter. Very, very interesting presentation. I was curious about something because there's a masculinity element here, and I can think of more violent games than football. So boxing or ice hockey, which in our region, Notre Dame and Michigan, are he's rivals on the ice as well. And ice hockey has a very different, I think, dimension to religion. And it's quite striking because I think actually religion is considered a weakness in a player. Has been historically. I think that's probably changing. What is it about football that brought this about then? Why hasn't it, or should it permeate other sports in a similar way? Are there connections that you're aware of in other sports? And I would even push that further in female sports, which are becoming more prominent as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a great question. And other sports, certainly the involvement of masculinity and religion are all there. I'll tell you first why I selected football. I wanted the book and my project to really focus on the shifts of Christian manhood is a kind of a consistent theme throughout, and how shifts in that happen. And football remains the only sport with no organized female leagues or even teams at any level. There's no junior high school. There are women that play football for their male team, but there are no women's leagues. And when some have popped up, they are hypersexualized versions of the game. And so, as I was formulating this project, I decided to focus on football there. And I think you're right that football is interesting because football, from the beginning until watching games today, the rules can just change on a whim. You watch a kickoff in the NFL, and it looks like nothing you've ever seen before. And the rules have made it less violent, but early on, the early days of football, it was hard to get more violent than that. The one comment from the BYU football player about not being able to stop, you crawl like a snake, and someone would come, and usually they would use a knee or an elbow or a shoulder on the back of your neck. And so in the late 1800s and early 1900s, death was a pretty common occurrence actually on football fields. I believe it was 1909 where there were 19 deaths related to football alone. And on top of that, hundreds of injuries. And it's actually that violence and the serious deaths and injuries that leads to the creation of the NCAA. Its original mission is to try to remove the violence of the game. But to answer the other parts of your question, there are certainly other Christians that infuse their faith and their masculinity into sports. I'm thinking about for baseball, Christy Matheson was given the nickname the Christian gentleman at a time when baseball was known not for its religious commitment. But there's also for those hockey fans out there, there's a book by a friend of mine. His name's Matt Hoven on, I believe it's called The Hockey Priest. But it's about religion and hockey and Catholicism in Canada. It's a really great book.
Also, just on other sports with silly names, they've been calling Connor McDavid McJesus a lot.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You do get those similar sorts of things. We do have a question just sort of on the, since you've mentioned this book that covers Canada, Gabriele Boccaccini has asked, is this an American phenomenon only? He sees similar dynamics with South American soccer players, so definitively, but not so common in Europe. I guess I'm going to tack on to this question. Do we see the same sort of, are there other sports that we get the same sort of expression of masculinity in other places that you know
of? I'm very much focused on American history, and I'm getting on really, again, we're sticking with hockey terms here, thin ice, going and commenting on global sports. But I think it's interesting to see the infusion of, and the way I see it is almost an outsourcing of American religion through sports. And so the first thing that actually came to my mind with religion and soccer is actually in Spain, and Christian Pulisic, the American soccer player who is seen as kind of the greatest soccer player around, but is very outspoken about his faith. That is a very conservative evangelical brand of faith. And so for him, interacting in a very different religious context in Europe and playing European football is quite different. But the distinct thing about this, and again, another reason why I chose football and college football, is that is American. We are trying our best to send teams to Brazil and Europe to play NFL games, but it is this distinctly American game. And I think for these different religious communities, especially the ones on the outside of mainstream America, it gives them the opportunity to prove their loyalty to American culture and pathways of assimilation, but also trying to maintain some sort of uniqueness at the same time. And so as far as again, the formation of the book, I chose football for its distinctly American nature.
Nice. John, I think we'll go to you next. You're muted still, John.
There we go. Yeah, I have a question. In your travels through narratives by particular players, I don't know if you've come across these, but you had mentioned, the problem of negotiating whether God was on my team at this point or whether he was not because we lost. This is something that all of us look at and come on. Is God really concerned that Notre Dame wins over
Surely not.
Michigan or vice versa? Um, and I guess my point is that have you seen in your research narratives from particular players and how they deal with that situation, and does it have an effect on their faith when let's say they lose and they have a losing season? How does that affect their faith?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely something that I focus on in the book, because it is really easy to believe that God is on your side when you are Newt Rockney, whose overall record was something like 125, 17, and 3 or something. I mean, his winning percentage is just crazy, and it's like, clearly God is on our side and he is blessing us. But the interesting thing that I found is uh, the narratives and the descriptions around losing, the game takes on a different meaning. And specifically, the most interesting case of this for me, again, something we didn't get in tonight, but I have a chapter on Wheaton College, the evangelical college in the suburb of Chicago, which is interesting because it doesn't fit in with, and why I left it out is it doesn't fit with these programs at all. Wheaton makes the explicit decision to not try to join big time college football. And for the longest time, Wheaton was just terrible. And you joined the team, and these players would join the team, and they had to ask themselves, why would I do this? Why would I put my body through this? Why would I put time into this if winning is like never the expected outcome? And as the thing that's interesting is kind of looking at this over longer periods of time, you see the spiritual formation of the game become the emphasis. And the emphasis doesn't come in wins and losses, but specifically at Wheaton, as it's kind of transitioning from fundamentalism towards an evangelicalism, uh, an emphasis on preparing you for life after graduation and specifically going into the mission field. So by taking these bumps and bruises, that is what the world is going to do to you. The world is going to attack you. And this is a kind of a physical manifestation of that. And at other programs, I mean, Notre Dame just kind of had pretty great success throughout, and so they don't really dive into that as much. But at other schools, again, at Wheaton, where they kind of continually struggle, or at others where you win some and then you lose some, the messaging around the program definitely kind of ebbs and flows with the success on the field. And I think on some level they did, sometimes more explicitly than others, but the meaning that they would find in the game as athletes, as coaches, as administrators, even. Why are we putting so much money into this thing if we're going to lose during the Great Depression, during World War II? Like, so many things. The world is asking big questions of us. Why are we still trotting out a group of young students to play this game of football? And in those times of struggle, the answer becomes more religious. The religious meaning crafted and found in the game increases, and wins kind of decrease there. Great question. You're welcome.
Good answer.
Thanks.
We've got another question here in the chat. Wants to know if your book covers hypermasculinity and sexual minorities and the stigma they face both on and off the field, and how that dynamic on the football field may be linked to or relate to religion in that way.
No, that's not something that something I wish I could have covered, but didn't necessarily have the source base to get into on a deeper level. But I think it's an excellent source of inquiry, and it's all historians. We hope that someone can come along and build on this and take this in new directions. And the question that I always got, and it's a great question, is just like, what about other faiths? And and this is kind of a question kind of in that thing, like what else does this touch? And I think I believe it touches so much but muscular Judaism, muscular Islam, and for that, I think is definitely there. I think there are obviously different manifestations and different meanings found in those communities in different games. But to try to, again, wrap my arms around this subject and make it somewhat manageable, I couldn't cover everything that I had hoped. And it's kind of one of those things, as soon as you like let that one wall down a little bit, like the size just mushrooms quite significantly. But I think it's a great thing that I'd love to personally know more about.
All right. We don't have any other questions in the chat right now. So I may just ask another one.
Okay.
So you talked about that there was this comparison of Falwell to Paul, and I'm curious if you looked at any of the way that Paul uses athletic metaphors specifically in his own writings, and like, do those specific metaphors get picked up by folks like Falwell as they sort of talk with their football teams? I guess, do you know of like specific instances where they're like, now we're going to look at this letter where Paul uses this metaphor and be like, this is about our sport too?
Huh. I have to remind myself as I study these people that they are usually like athletes or football coaches first and not theologians, and give them some grace on that. I'm really interested in Newt Rockne and his conversion, and I've tried to do some work on that, but he was just a football coach, and he was a religious person, had religious ideas, but not, again, he's not writing theological treatises. But in to my answer to that, and why I say that, is that it's not that deep, but it is, there is a heavy emphasis on Paul and his writings, and running the race, and but those usually appear in just like a verse, given, a quick verse, like to justify why we're doing this. And so when Wheaton is losing, talking about perseverance through kind of Pauline letters, uh, there's one, I call it in the book, Three Musketeers interpretation of Paul, where it's like, we're all together, one for all and all for one. They actually use that phrase in this translation of a verse. I think it's in Corinthians. I don't know, but I should be able to reference that. But in that, you do see the use of biblical language, but it's not. Again, it's not usually teased out, and I think that is one of the things that I'm hoping that this can do, and trying to encourage, is more thoughtful reflection on what this means, because it means, the implications of it are a lot, and especially for young people that are athletes, that do find so much of their identity both as a person, but then also as a person of faith in their sport. And when those two things get so intertwined that they're inseparable, what happens when the sport is taken away from you? And who are you, not only as a person, but who are you as, again, a person of faith, when that thing has been so central to all of your identities? And so, again, I'm not a theologian, I'm a historian. So hoping that this kind of theological, or this historical look at these theological questions, can provide people some space to reflect on that.
Nice. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I just want to give you a space if there's anything you wished you could have mentioned, or that you wished someone had asked you a question about. You can say, nope, we got everything. That's okay.
No, I think we covered a lot of it. I think the one thing that we didn't get into, that the book wrestles with quite a bit more, is the issue of race, and we kind of addressed that here. But throughout the book, look, I have a chapter on Wiley College, like I mentioned, but also on Baylor, that is explicitly, at the time, white Baptist college, and the tensions there. And I think Liberty, it's something that we kind of hinted at with Colin Kaepernick, but had its own struggles with the inclusion of Black athletes and Black football players onto its team and its campus. And so Yeah, so that's the only thing that the book kind of goes into more, and that I wish we had more time to go into here. But other than that, I think it's great, and I appreciate all of you for coming and for listening, for the great questions. It's wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right, John, do you want to close us out then?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I can't wait till your book comes out. Do you have a an idea of when that's going to happen?
It comes out December 22nd, just in time to put into your stocking.
Ah,
Yeah. So yeah, December 22nd is when it comes out, but you can pre-order it now.
oh, good.
And I
Yeah.
have dropped the link for that a couple times in the chat for folks.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Of
Well,
course.
thank you for your presentation. We really appreciated it, and we appreciated your presence here, and um, we hope you'll come back sometime.
I'd love to. I really would.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks everybody for participating.